Welcome to Biztech's Personal Finance Show. Today we look at alternative investments and how we discuss investing in art and find out how your enjoyment in art can extend beyond the aesthetics. It can also be financially rewarding. Now, joining us today to give us a 101 on art investing is Sophia Shung. Sophia is the Executive Director of Suma Orientalis, a KL-based gallery founded in 2017, specializing in Asian art. Now, Sophia is one of only 6 fine art appraisers in Asia that are registered with the International Society of Appraisers in the US. Sophia, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be here to share some of our knowledge and experience with your audience at Biztech.Asia.
Now, Sophia, tell us about yourself and Suma Orientalis and how you got started in the art business.
I come from the background of finance and insurance, and subsequently I was trained in auctioneering and art appraisal as well. So back in 2017, I had the idea of setting up this gallery to showcase some very wonderful Malaysian talents and also a lot of artists who may not be Malaysian themselves, but they have been residing in this part of the world for some time. So we thought it would be a very interesting idea to show their talent, to show their art, their creation, their creative energy to our audience here in Kuala Lumpur.
And who are your customers and what are the demographics like?
It's actually a very good mix of very senior, very well-informed collectors in town. We also have clients from Southeast Asian region. Recently, we actually expanded to a lot of to collectors of younger generation. You will be surprised, my youngest client is only in his mid-20s.
Okay, and it's his own money or is it family money that he's investing in art?
The interesting part is that due diligence is not so much of a thing in art dealings. So I, of course, did not ask much about the background, but we became personal friends afterwards. And I am very much convinced that being a professional himself, he is self-made.
Okay. Now, so many of us have no idea what the art industry is like. Could you give us a perspective of how the whole art industry ecosystem sort of blends together?
If we take Malaysia, for example, basically the entire art ecosystem consists of many different players. The most important one, of course, is the producer of art itself, whom we call artists. And then we would have the art galleries, the art gallery managers as well, the curators who curate exhibitions and who put things together. And we do have a lot of practitioners that come in between, people like art installers, people like art writers, people like those who write and publish online or offline with regard to news and information about art. And then we have the academicians who study art, record or document art in a very systematic way. I also do publications. And then we also have publishers who are interested in producing art books. And then of course, last but not least, some people need to consume this. So at the end of the day, we are looking for visitors, we are looking for audience who would enjoy art, come to gallery or go to National Art Gallery, museums to look at art, to enjoy art as they could actually relate and engage to the art itself. And also, if they can afford it and if they really like it that much, they can of course bring it home. And these are the people we call as collectors.
Okay, now I want to zoom in on 2 types of people actually. One, the artists themselves. Can an artist survive in Malaysia?
Well, of course they can, pretty much quite well. But let's chop the topic down to a few different pieces. And I think we're talking about different scenarios and different possibilities. Most artists, if they have a very stable or if they have a very systematic way of planning their career and also have a good support system that includes the art galleries, the rest of the practitioners, for example, the academicians, also the art collectors, all this, if everybody can come together, pretty much we can sustain the entire ecosystem. And it's not so much about just the career of 1 or 2 artists, it's pretty much an industry thing. However, now if we take the pandemic into consideration and to think that having the lockdowns could be quite an obstacle to our original schedule of having regular physical exhibitions, art events or art talks where we can engage with different audience. That could become quite a challenge for our artists, as well as for some art galleries, of course.
So have you seen a shift in consumption patterns in terms of purchase? Because I'm sure some galleries are more tech savvy than others. And together with video showings and also good websites, they are able to make sales, not so much online, but assisted because they have a regular stream of customers.
Yeah, I believe so. Of course, being tech savvy could be one plus point for the art galleries or anyone who wants to sell art at this point of time, because apparently physical contact or physical events are quite impossible at this moment.
Now, what role does, in a Malaysian context, the art patron play in basically growing an artist and basically mapping out their careers?
Very serious art collectors will become patrons to artists or a particular collective or group of artists by many different ways. We could take one example, which is Rimbundahan and Rimbundahan residency program. I think Angela Hijaz has made herself and the Rimbundahan set up quite a support to their local art ecosystem, because they run programs which nurtures the artist's talent, also to help them to expand their creative energy in the comfortable environment and actually very beautiful resort kind of setup in Rimbundahan itself. So programs like this would be very helpful. And of course, with the publicity, it also draws a lot of attention from media and from people outside of the industry to actually look at art. Now, another example is that some collectors eventually would have a collection which is big enough to be displayed for the public audience to enjoy. There are a couple of art collectors in town who have already done that. Also, some people may even extend further into establishing a kind of public museum or a private museum, which covers not just their own collection, but to also put in fundings and hire a very good team to run wonderful programs in support of the art.
So this is like Tun Daim, for example, with the Ilham Gallery, isn't it?
That's right. You are absolutely right. Yeah.
Now, art investing is often seen as something that only the very rich can afford. But that's not necessarily the case, because I know someone who bought an Ibrahim Hussein piece more than 30 years ago for a few hundred ringgit. And I think it's probably worth close to 500,000 or 400,000 or something like that today. So it's amazing capital appreciation. So I think it was purchased for 300 or 400 ringgit or that time ago. How can someone start to invest in art at the ground level?
Brian, you have touched a very interesting point. So before I even go into put some of my thoughts together to tell you how you start this, let me just lure you a little bit with some goodies that I recently found out. I recently found that in an art exhibition catalog published by the National Art Gallery around about 50 years ago, there was some very interesting thing that we no longer see today in publication, which is the pricing. So they included the pricing of the artworks in the little booklet. And I found very familiar names in there. One interesting thing is most of the names still exist today. Most of the names still they're still seen in the industry, and of course, eventually they became the senpai in the industry after so many years of development.
What is senpai?
Senpai is like masters.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's Japanese word.
Okay.
Yep. So I have seen Latif Mohidin. And since Sheikh Ahmad Jamal's pricing in the booklet, 50 years ago, it was stated as somewhere around 300 to 500, 600, 1,000 ringgit. Now, bear in mind, that amount of money may sound like it's very tiny today, but that was 50 years ago.
Yeah,
so
money then as well.
Exactly. But however, if we actually look at the face value, today, if you would go to the market and get a very decent piece of Latif Muhyiddin's painting or Sheikh Ahmad Jamal's painting, you may have to pay about 1,000 times higher in terms of pricing. Now we're talking about 300 to 600,000, some may even go up to 1,000,000 ringgit. So that's one good point for people to consider collecting in the very beginning stage of the artist's career, and also to start collecting when you yourself are young enough.
Okay.
So yeah.
So, but there could be two ends of the equation, Sophia. There will be some people like your client who's 25 years old and is astute enough and also has the passion to start to collect art. There may also be the second lot of newbie who has probably just retired. They have paid off their kids' education and stuff, and they have a lot of money, or they have some money, they've retired, they know they have money to retire comfortably, and they want to start investing in things like art, which perhaps they were too cautious to do in their early years. How should a newbie build up their knowledge and appreciation of art, especially local art?
I think it's the same way as how you gain knowledge in any other field. You read up the information. These days it's very, very convenient to get information, especially on art, from the internet. Of course, watch out the source of information, because you would probably find more handy information or more useful information from official sites. And then, of course, to talk to people who are in the industry, go to a gallery, speak to the gallery managers, or speak to some artists, speak to other collectors as well. That would be very useful.
How do we know what type of artists will be popular, or the type of artists that perhaps their art will appreciate and value? Because it's very hard to determine when they're young, right?
Well, how I wish that judging art or evaluating art could be as simple as evaluating a stock, just like how you do in our financial market. Unfortunately, there's no hard and fast rule in the art world. What people always like to ask me is that, Sophia, how do you know a piece of painting is a good painting? Now, I can be very diplomatic and, throw back with a rhetoric answer to tell you, well, there is no good and bad painting, but deep inside my heart, I would say the answer is that you have to see enough to know what you really like and what you don't quite fancy. So at the end of the day, I think the rule of thumb, number one, is of course to look for something that you really enjoy, something that you have to be prepared in case in future, for whatsoever reason, you are not going to sell the painting off, or sell, let's say, the artwork. It may not be a painting, could be a photograph, could be a video art, could be anything, could be a sculpture as well. Now, let's say in future, you're not going to sell off that piece of artwork. Are you able to live with it? That's one very important point, because at the end of the day, you are still going to see that artwork.
Exactly, because it's pleasure. You derive pleasure out of looking at it. It's hanging on the wall, for example. You look at it and you always say, wow, that is so beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, so the enjoyment is what you actually pay for. That, of course, is number one. Number two, if you would like to go from a very objective way of like assessing the criteria of whether this artist can make it or not in future and whatnot, I would say that I think it is similar as how you assess some stocks. For example, do they have good people around them? Do they have a good support system around them?
And that's very important for an artist, isn't it? If people are following this person, you kind of guess that it's relatively going to be a safe bet, because people who have the eye are buying his artwork or her artwork.
Yes and no. Of course, the art itself or the artist itself has to have enough substance. And then that is another thing that the collectors or the person who wanted to come in to buy art or collect art has to have the eye to be able to judge. So I'm saying that in between, whether this art that you are putting your money into today, whether it can turn to be something really valuable in 10 or 20 years time, what you already gain in between is the enjoyment. So take it from this point of view and you would feel much better and you won't be fixing your eye only on the ROI.
Okay. Now, if I want to start collecting art, what sort of ticket size can I start collecting art that potentially is really young artists that's just coming out, but perhaps there is a future with this artist?
Brian, how do people look at startups?
Well, startups, very interesting. When you go in as an angel investor, you spend very little money, and then hopefully in a couple of years, the Series A, the Series B round, the valuation goes up. So you got to be in very early in the game.
That's right. And you are looking for the growth.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So this is what happens when new collectors or fresh collectors come in to start looking at emerging artists or very, very young artists who have just graduated from art school. But of course, having said that, some artists may be self-taught, and in my personal opinion, I think it's a substance that matters. Yes. So whether or not they come from a very important art school may not be a very significant point for me to consider, but well, it may mean something.
Does that help if somebody comes from Parsons School of Design or something like that and then starts to paint? And is that an accelerator for growth, for example, in terms of the career of the artist?
Of course, going to art schools would definitely help in terms of educating the artists to put things together in a very systematic way. And I'm talking about not just the process of making art, but the process of managing his or her own career as a whole as well. And of course, going to art schools would definitely give them a foundation of the networking that they already have the minute they graduate from the school, the teachers, the lecturers, the classmates and whatnot. So this would be some of the important points that we can look at. But I would want to touch on this. I have actually come across a lot of very interesting artists who are self-taught. Okay. Now, self-taught can also be great in future. Doesn't mean that their career is second class. I don't think so. But of course, then again, whether they have the right attitude, whether they have the right team to chart the career with, that would be very significant.
Okay, so can you give us, say I'm a newbie, I want to start investing in art. What are the top 3 or 4 things that I need to do in the next 6 months?
Next 6 months would be the good time for you to shop in art world, because now, of course, given the current situation, I think a lot of people are also out in the market, put their best things to show to people, and it's actually a shopper's market. So enjoy the shopping spree. But my rule of thumb, number 1, look for something that you really enjoy, that you really like. Secondly, work within your budget, know what you are looking for. And of course, if you have a smaller budget, it's just like how we look at startup businesses, how we look at young entrepreneurs. It's the same thing. They may become something really huge in future. They may not as well, So most important of all, I would say, if rule number 2 fails, refer to rule number 1. So okay. What if they don't turn out to be something great in future? I mean, you have already enjoyed the art. And of course, number 3, I think you can refer to people who have been in the industry for some time, those who come up with very interesting or very good exhibitions, those who come up with very important publications as well. So speak to the art gallery, speak to some people who have already started collecting art. With internet and with all this information on the social media around, I'm sure it's very easy to come by. And of course, refer to Biztech.Asia.
Thank you very much, Sophia. We've been speaking to Sophia Shung, the Executive Director of Suma Orientalis, on Biztech's personal finance show on the 101 of art investing. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out our Facebook and our LinkedIn pages, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Thanks a lot for tuning in.